Hi all, I hope all is well. It was really nice spending the lunch hour together. I enjoyed our conversation around mindfulness and wellness and relaxation and the practice of law and the living of life. Thank you very much for welcoming me so hospitably. I appreciated your introducing yourselves and the attention you offered and the insights and the questions that you brought into our room. So that we could go a little deeper around subject matter that really is the subject matter and practices of a lifetime. I hope that in the hour and a little bit that we were together, that you took away something, whether it was a relaxation practice or a little bit about the mindfulness practice or an insight around the ways that we can be a little bit more fully present and the benefits that can flow in the moments of our day and more broadly across our lifetime. And I'm going to take a few moments just to recap some of the things that we talked about so that it can remind you of something. Because oftentimes we learn something and we find it interesting and then we sort of move on and our attention gets ahead of ourselves and we're off on the next thing and we sort of leave something behind that we would have liked to have maybe spent a little more time with. The landscape of the mind, as a reminder, that diagram, keep it with you, keep it close, and when you find yourself feeling a little agitated, you could say, where am I? And locate yourself on the landscape of the mind. There is a science piece on the other side, on the top right, that talks about how research finds that if you can really name your state of mind, this is fear, this is doubt, this is worry, this is hopelessness, this is frustration, this is in the weeds, this is the dead end that I feel like I've encountered, whatever that might be, that it flips our relationship to our experience so that no longer are we as caught in it, but rather we're more aware of it. And that's really a game changer or the pivot point that we spent a bit of time talking about and really gets to the heart of mindfulness. So keep that close by if you like it. Locate yourself when you feel a little bit out of sorts. If you don't see where you are on there, write it in. Let me know, because I'm always interested in modifying it. It's gone through iterations over the years. And that can be a mindfulness practice in the moment of becoming more aware of your experience when you're sort of caught in the grips of it. On the other side, there's some of the science. And so I encourage you to look at that. And those come from Science Daily. It's a nice website that has a lot of things science related, has a lot of mindfulness findings. And you might find it of interest to look for other areas that you might be interested in, mindfulness and blank, and see what comes up. They're just 1 or 2 page write-ups. They're not the underlying science, so be careful that you don't take things, don't overblown, because sometimes when people write up things, they exaggerate. So ultimately, always please do defer to your own direct experience. But these can be nice inspirations, this research, other people's testimonials as to what it is that we might be able to offer ourselves and those with whom we work and those with whom we live and love. So I'm going to touch on the pieces that we spoke to, and I'm going to show you some books that have come to mind either because some of you spoke to them or I think they might be useful given some of the things that were talked about. So just to recap, we learned some relaxation practices. In particular, we learned about slowing down the in-breath and slowing down the out-breath. It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a wonderful book called The Healing Power of the Breath. The subtitle is Simple Techniques to Reduce Stress and Anxiety, Enhance Concentration, and Balance Your Emotions. And it teaches a breathing practice, one of many, known as coherent breathing, where we take about 5 to 6 breaths a minute. And we do that for a little period of time and the physiological benefits that flow from that. So it's a little bit more detailed than just a few slower, deeper breaths, but it's in the same vicinity, and you might find this somewhat thin treatment to be a nice read. There's also more vigorous sort of promises of breathing practices, but since some things were raised, here's one that just came out recently called The Breathing Cure by a popular writer, Patrick McKeown. And the subtitle is Develop Habits for a Healthier, Happier, and Longer Life. 26 easy breathing exercises and natural solutions, and then there's a whole bunch of them. Anxiety and panic, asthma and allergies, insomnia, lower back pain, snoring and sleep apnea, improved intimacy, high blood pressure, diabetes, epilepsy, and other ailments. And so, we're not talking about, I don't think, a panacea, but we are talking about, a healing medicine that we have within us of this breath. So there's lots of claims. If you're like me, you sort of take them as interesting, but you don't just sort of accept without your own exploration. And also, if you are serious about some relaxation and breathing practices, some of them are more vigorous, do talk with your medical professional and get a sense of it, because they are serious physiological adjustments that we make, and they're to be taken seriously. Alrighty. Some of you mentioned Peak Mind. This is the book that my colleague, Mishi Jha, wrote. She's a wonderful researcher, and we've collaborated for the last 13 years. In it, she talks about, it's really a wonderful sort of autobiography, as well as rich with information on the science of attention and ultimately mindfulness. She talks about 4 practices: focused attention, body scan, open monitoring, and connection. And these are the practices that are on the app that I've been teaching for many, many, many years, and that are fundamental to the MBAT, mindfulness-based attention training program, that she refers to. So you can, if you're interested in the app, you can actually hear the very practices that the soldiers and the other members of the military and first responders and accountants and athletes and others that we've done research with, the very same practices and really the very same voice that they experience. But there are many wonderful apps out there: Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer, the list goes on. And if you have one that you find to be useful, then good, stick with it. There's another book that I want to introduce you to. I mentioned Sharon Salzberg. She's the one that said mindfulness is being able to tell the difference between the stories we tell ourselves and what's actually happening. And she has a wonderful book that is called Real Happiness: The Power of Meditation, to that really good question that was asked about the difference between mindfulness and meditation, or the overlap. And here she's talking about mindfulness meditation. And it breaks things down very, very nicely. And I think you would find this of interest. She also has another book called Real Happiness at Work. But I would start with this one, although that's also a good one. There's also a wonderful book by Dan Harris called 10% Happier. He was an ABC News correspondent, did a lot of stuff in overseas and war zones, etc., came back and then sort of had a little bit of a waking up moment in terms of his own wellness, and ultimately turning and finding mindfulness to be among the things he looked at the most tangible and actionable. How I tamed the voice in my head, reduced stress without losing my edge, that's on our minds, I know, and found self-help that actually works, a true story. It's a very funny and meaningful dive into his journey of finding mindfulness and about mindfulness practices. Alrighty, I will say one more thing. A book that I recently published that we use as a textbook in teaching mindfulness and law at the University of Miami, and is being used in other law schools around the country, The Mindful Law Student. It's a mindfulness and law practice guide, and it's really written for any audience, truly any audience. But it's couched at times in the language of law students, but in experiential settings that everybody can relate to. So if you're interested in some of the things we talked about, and you'd like to have a clean read on mindfulness and meditative practices, you might find it to be quite useful. Alrighty, so we learned about the slower, deeper breath. Let's do that now if you'd like, just as a reminder. We can never have too much of it, I would say. Breathing in and breathing out. I asked the question, where might we do this during the day? And some of the things that if we had had more time to really flesh it out, we might have considered is when you get to a stop sign, when you get to the office in the morning, when you're at home getting ready to, at the end of the day, getting ready to go into the home and transition, when you're in the middle of a conversation and you're beginning to get a little agitated or angry or frustrated or annoyed and you realize it, can be quite useful, both in moments just unto themselves and brought into a little bit of where the action is. The second relaxation practice was called the physiological side. It involved this. Or, as was commented, could be blowing through the mouth as if blowing through a straw, or with the mouth closed, doing this. There's a lot being talked about that practice. Some research came out recently showing that it was among a variety of practices that were sort of pitted against each other, including some mindfulness practices. In the short term, it had the biggest bang for the buck, the physiological side. We also did the focused attention practice. There were a variety of mindfulness practices. We could have done the body scan, which one of your colleagues talked about. We could have done the open monitoring practice. We could have done the connection practice. All of them are on the app. It's called So Be Mindful. So Be Mindful. It's on the App Store. It's free, but you want an access code to unlock it. And so if you do download it, email me. And I think there's a way to do it actually on the app itself, and I will send you the access code. And that primary practice is to focus attention on an object like the breath, to when the mind wanders and we realize it, bring attention back to the breath, and just to have that as the instruction for a period of time. I like to offer practices in 6-minute, 12-minute, and 18-minute increments because I think that that's useful. It's also, my first book was called The 6-Minute Solution, my first mindfulness book for lawyers. And the idea was, build point 1. When I was at White & Case, I was billing point 1, point 2, point 5, whatever that might be. And it really sort of puts in perspective what it is that this asks of us to bill a point 1 or a point 2 on behalf of ourselves. And so the practices that are available on the app are in 6, 12, and 18-minute increments, so you can really find the length that works best for you given your tolerance for practice, we could say, your familiarity with it, and how much time you have. All right, I hope this was a helpful recap of some of the relaxation practices that we looked at, where we use the breath as a tool to manipulate our state of physiological arousal, as well as where we use the breath as an object for attention, which could be anything else. Candle, sound, sensations of the hands, whatever that might be, a word, as Bob mentioned, a word that we recite over and over. And then when the mind wanders and we realize it, we return our attention back to the object. I hope this was a helpful reminder. Please, you're more than welcome to reach out to me by emailing me or giving me a call or texting me. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Alrighty, wishing you all the best. And again, thank you for inviting me to spend a little time with you.